The Murder at the Vicarage, by Agatha Christie. Chapter 23. Griselda and I went home separately, as I wanted to go round by the barrow to see if the police had found the suitcase. "Nothing yet, sir," Hurst said. "But this is the only place where Miss Cram could have hidden it. She was seen walking into the woods, and that path goes only to Old Hall and to this barrow." I wished Hurst good luck, and continued on towards the vicarage. I was almost there, when an idea suddenly came into my brain. The day after the murder, I had found broken bushes beside the path. I had thought that Lawrence had broken them. But perhaps Dr. Stone or Miss Cram had gone that way. I had just reached the place, so, once again, I pushed my way through the bushes. This time I noticed some more small branches were broken. Someone had been here since Lawrence and myself. I soon came to the place where I had met Lawrence, and continued on further. Suddenly it opened out into a little grassy space. There were trees above, but again there were some broken bushes. I went across and looked between them, and there, with great excitement, I saw something smooth hidden under the leaves. Then I pulled out a small suitcase. I tried to open it, but it was locked. As I stood up, I noticed a shiny brown stone lying on the ground. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. Then, carrying the suitcase, I continued on towards home. When I reached the lane, I immediately heard a familiar voice. "Oh, Mr. Clement! How clever of you! You've found it!" "Yes, Miss Marple. I'm going to take it down to the police station." "You don't think it would be better to telephone?" "Of course, it would be better to telephone." To walk through the village with the suitcase would only encourage gossip, so I went with Miss Marple into her house and telephoned Inspector Slack. He arrived not long afterwards, and not in a good mood. "Sir, if you thought you knew where this suitcase was hidden, why did you not tell the police?" "Because I was in the woods, when I suddenly thought about it." He had brought several keys with him, and in 1 minute the suitcase was open. The first thing we saw was a red scarf. Next, there was a very old coat, then an old cap, and an old pair of boots. At the bottom was a package wrapped in newspaper. The inspector tore it open. For a moment, no one spoke. Inside the parcel were some little silver objects and a silver plate. "Colonel Prothero's 17th century Taza," Miss Marple cried. "So that was their plan," the inspector replied. "Robbery. But no one has reported these things missing." "Perhaps they didn't know they were missing," I suggested. "Colonel Prothero probably kept them locked away somewhere." "I must investigate this," said the inspector. "I'll go up to Old Hall now. That's why Dr. Stone went to London. He was afraid that because of the murder we might search his rooms and find this silver. So he told the girl to put on these old clothes and go and hide the suitcase in the woods. Then, when it was safe, he planned to return and collect it one night. Well, this proves he had nothing to do with the murder." When he had gone, I said, "Well, that's one mystery solved. And Stone is not a murder suspect." "It would seem so," said Miss Marple. "But isn't this silver very valuable? A Taza sold the other day for over £1,000. That's what I mean. The sale would take some time to arrange, and a lot of people would know about it. But if the robbery was reported, well, the things couldn't be sold at all." "I don't quite understand," I said. "Well, it seems to me that the only way this silver could be sold would be if it had been replaced by copies. And of course, as you say, then Dr. Stone would have no reason to murder Colonel Prothero." "Exactly," I said. "Yes, but Colonel Prothero did say that he was going to have all his things valued for insurance. He talked about it a lot. Of course, I don't know if he had made any actual arrangements, but if he had—" "I see. Of course, when the expert saw the silver, he would know it wasn't the real thing, and then Colonel Prothero would remember that he had shown the things to Dr. Stone." "I understand. And I think we ought to find out for certain." I went once more to the telephone and called Old Hall. Mrs. Prothero, can you tell me if the contents of Old Hall were ever valued? Her answer came immediately. I thanked her, replaced the receiver, and turned to Miss Marple. Colonel Prothero had arranged for a man to come down from London on Monday, tomorrow, to make a full valuation. Because of the Colonel's death, the arrangement was cancelled. Then there was a reason for the murder, said Miss Marple softly. A reason, yes, but when the shot was fired, Dr. Stone was walking to the village with Mrs. Prothero and Lawrence Redding. Yes, said Miss Marple, so he can't have done it. I returned to the vicarage and found my curate, Hawes, waiting for me in my study. He was walking up and down, and his whole body was shaking. My dear fellow, I said, you really must go away for a rest. Well, I did come to ask you if you would take the service tonight instead of me. Of course, you are not well. I am perfectly well, and I want to take the service. But I don't want all those eyes looking at me, and these pains in my head. Could you give me a glass of water? I brought the water to him. Then he took a small box from his pocket, took a pill from the box, and swallowed it with the water. I hope you don't take too many of those, I said. Oh no, Dr. Haydock warned me against that. Then he looked over at the window. You have been up at Old Hall today, haven't you? Yes. Excuse me, but did Mrs. Prothero ask you to go there? I looked at him, surprised. His face went red. I'm sorry. I just thought something had happened and that was why Mrs. Prothero had asked to see you. She wanted to discuss the funeral arrangements. Oh, that was all. I see. I did not reply. Finally, he said, Mr. Redding came to see me last night. I don't know why. Didn't he tell you? He just said he was a bit lonely in the evenings. But what does he want to come and see me for? I don't like it. I never suggested that he was guilty. The only person I suspected was Archer. Do you really think he shot Colonel Prothero? I asked. Colonel Prothero sent him to prison. He was determined to punish him, so he had a lot to drink and then shot him. You must admit that's likely. No, I don't. Why not? Because a man like Archer wouldn't kill a man with a pistol. It's the wrong weapon. Hawes looked shocked. It wasn't the answer he had expected. Soon he thanked me and left. I had gone to the front door with him, and on the hall table I saw 4 notes. They all looked as though they had been written by the same person, and they all said, urgent. The only difference I could see was that one was much dirtier than the others. Mary came out of the kitchen and saw me looking at them. They came by hand after lunch, she said. All except one. I found that in the letterbox. I took them into the study. The first one said, Dear Mr. Clement, I have heard something about the death of poor Colonel Prothero, so I would like your advice about whether to go to the police or not. Perhaps you could come and see me this afternoon. Yours sincerely, Martha Price Ridley. I opened the second. Dear Mr. Clement, I am very worried. I have learned something that I think may be important. I am frightened of going to the police. Please, dear Vicar, could you come to my house this afternoon and help me? Yours, very sincerely, Caroline Weatherby. The third I could guess without reading it. Dear Mr. Clement, I have heard something that is very important. I feel you should be the first to know about it. Will you call in and see me this afternoon? Amanda Hartnell. I opened the 4th note. Dear Vicar, your wife has been seen coming out of Mr. Redding's cottage in a secretive manner. They are having a love affair. I think you ought to know. A friend. I crushed the paper in my hand and threw it into the fireplace just as Griselda entered the room. What's that you're throwing away? She asked. Rubbish, I said. I took a box of matches from my pocket. But Griselda was too quick for me. She had picked up the paper and read it before I could stop her. Then she threw it back to me. I lit it and watched it burn. Griselda had moved away. She was standing by the window looking out into the garden. Len? She said. Yes, my dear. When Lawrence came here, I told you that I had only known him slightly before. That wasn't true. I had known him rather well. In fact, I had been in love with him. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Oh, because you're so silly in some ways. Just because you're much older than I am, you think that I might like other men more than you. You're very clever at hiding things, I said. Yes, I rather enjoy it. But it was true that I didn't know about Lawrence and Anne, and I wondered why he hardly noticed me. I'm not used to it. She paused. You do understand, Len? Yes, I said. I understand. But did I? Chapter 20. I still felt upset about the anonymous letter, but I picked up the other 3 letters and left the vicarage. I wondered what it was that the 3 ladies wanted to tell me. I also wondered whether Inspector Slack had returned from Old Hall, so I went to the police station and found that he had, and that Miss Cram had returned with him. She was sitting there and saying very loudly that she had never taken a suitcase to the woods. That awful old Miss Marple has made a mistake, and I am leaving right now, unless you are going to arrest me. The inspector answered by opening the door for her, and Miss Cram walked out. Well, said Slack, Miss Marple may have made a mistake. She may, I said, but Miss Marple is usually right. What about the silver, Inspector? It was all there at Old Hall, so one lot of silver must be a copy. There's a good man in Much Benham, who knows all about old silver, and I've sent a car to fetch him. We'll soon know which is which. But robbery is unimportant compared with murder. I said goodbye and walked into the village to see the old ladies. I thought that, of course, the news they had heard must be the same thing, but I was wrong. I went to Miss Hartnell's house first. So good of you to come. Nobody dislikes gossip more than I do, Vicar. But this is about duty. I could see that she was enjoying herself. When I called on Mrs. Lestrange on the afternoon of the murder, I thought she was out. But I have heard that she has said she was at home all the time, and that she didn't answer the door because, well, she didn't want to see me. She has been ill, I said. I'll? Nonsense. And it is not true that she was in the house. She wasn't. I know. How can you possibly know? Miss Hartnell's face turned red. I had rung the bell twice, perhaps 3 times, and I suddenly thought that perhaps it did not work. Yes? I knew that it was easy to hear the bell from outside, so I went round the house and knocked on the windows. And I looked through them as well, but there was no one in the house. What time was this, Miss Hartnell? It must have been nearly 6 o'clock. I went straight home afterwards, and Mrs. Prothero called at about 6:30 to borrow a gardening magazine, and all the time the poor Colonel was lying murdered. Is that all you wanted to tell me? I thought it might be important, Mr. Clement. I visited Miss Weatherby next. Dear Vicar, you are so kind to come round so quickly. You must understand that I heard this from someone who knows the truth. In St. Mary Mead, a person who knows the truth is always someone else's servant. So, who was that? I promised that I would tell no one their name, and I always keep a promise. Well, this person said they saw a certain lady walk up the road that goes to the vicarage. But before that, this lady looked around in a very strange way to see if anyone had noticed her. This was just before 6 o'clock. On which day? Miss Weatherby gave a little cry. The day of the murder, of course. And the name of the lady? Begins with an L, said Miss Weatherby. There was still Mrs. Price Ridley to see, and the first thing she said was, I will not say anything at all to the police, but I have heard of something that I think they should know about. Does it involve Mrs. Lestrange? I asked. Why should it? I said no more. It is very simple, she continued. My servant, Clara, was standing at the front gate when she heard a sneeze. Yes, that's all. She heard a sneeze. But, I said, why is that strange? Mrs. Price Ridley said very slowly, she heard a sneeze on the day of the murder at a time when there was no one in your house. Because the murderer was hiding in the bushes, What you have to look for is a man with a bad cold. Well, our servant Mary has a bad cold. It must have been her sneeze Clara heard. It was a man's sneeze, said Mrs. Price Ridley. And Clara couldn't hear Mary sneeze in your kitchen if she was standing at my gate. You couldn't hear anyone sneezing in my study from your gate, I said. But the man might have been hiding in the bushes, said Mrs. Price Ridley. Well, that is all I have to say. I said goodbye, and as I left, I asked Clara about the sneeze. It's quite true, sir. I heard a sneeze, and it wasn't an ordinary sneeze. Nothing about a crime is ever ordinary. The sneeze was, I imagined, a special murderer's sneeze. I decided to visit Dr. Haydock and went down the road to his house. How good to see you, he said. What's the news? I told him about Stone. Well, that explains a lot. He had read about archaeology, but he kept making mistakes, and Prothero must have noticed. You remember the disagreement they had. What about Miss Cram? Is she involved? The police aren't sure. I then told him that I was worried about my curate, Hawes, and that I was anxious that he should get away for a rest. Yes, I suppose that would be the best thing. Poor fellow. I thought you didn't like him. I don't. But I'm sorry for a lot of people I don't like. I'm even sorry for Prothero. Nobody ever liked him because he always thought he was right, and that others were always wrong. He was the same even when he was a young man. So, you knew him then? Oh, yes. When we lived in Westmoreland, I had a surgery not far from his house. But that was 20 years ago. Is that all you came to tell me, Clement? Dr. Haydock was watching me. So I told him about my talks with Miss Hartnell and Miss Weatherby. He paused, then said, It's true. I've been trying to protect Mrs. Lestrange from anything that might upset her. She's an old friend, but that's not my only reason. Mrs. Lestrange is dying. What? She has about a month to live. And on the evening of the murder she was here, in this house. But she wasn't here when I sent Mary for you. I mean, when we discovered the body. No. She'd gone to meet someone. In her own house. I don't know, Clement. I believed him, but I suspected that he knew more than he said. Then I thought of something, and I took from my pocket the shiny brown stone I had found in the woods. I held it out to him, and asked him what it was. Looks like picric acid. What is picric acid? It's an explosive. Where did you find it? I shook my head. He had his secrets. Well, I would have mine. Chapter 26. That evening, as I sat down to dinner, Griselda said, Oh, I forgot to tell you, Len. This note arrived for you when you were out. I took it, and shook my head. Across the top was written, By hand. Urgent. This, I said, must be from Miss Marple. She's the only old lady who hasn't written to me today. I was right. Dear Mr. Clement, I would very much like to talk to you. I will come over at 9:30. Perhaps dear Griselda and Dennis would be very kind and come over here and entertain my nephew. If I do not hear, I will come at the time I have said. Yours very sincerely, Jane Marple. I handed the note to Griselda. Oh, we'll go, she said cheerfully. They left at just after 9 o'clock, and at 9:30 exactly there was a little knock on my study window, and I opened the glass door for Miss Marple to come in. I think that you are wondering why I am so interested in this murder. I would like to explain. She paused, and I offered her a chair. You see, because I live alone, I need a hobby. I could, of course, choose sewing or drawing, but my hobby is human nature. It is so interesting, and when there is a mystery and I think I know the answer, it is so satisfying to find that I am right. You usually are, I said, smiling. Then I told her about the 3 notes I had received that afternoon. I told her about the picture at Old Hall with the person's face cut. I told her how Miss Cram had behaved at the police station, and I also told her about the shiny brown stone I had found. But it's probably got nothing to do with the case, I continued. Dr. Haydock said it was picric acid. I then asked her the question that I had wanted to ask her for some time. Miss Marple, who do you suspect? You said that there were 7 people. At least. Yes, said Miss Marple. But the point is that each thing has got to be explained correctly, and that's very difficult. If it wasn't for that note. The note? Yes, that note is wrong somehow. But, I said, it has been explained. It was written at 6:35 and another person, the murderer, put the incorrect time 6:20 at the top. But even so, said Miss Marple, it's all wrong. But why? Listen. She leaned forward excitedly. Mrs. Prothero walked past my garden, and she went to the study window and she looked in, and she didn't see Colonel Prothero. Because he was writing at the desk, I said. And that's what's all wrong. That was at 6:20. He wouldn't have needed to tell you that he couldn't wait any longer until after 6:30. So, why was he sitting at the desk then? I never thought of that, I said. Let us think about it again. Mrs. Prothero went to the window and thought the study was empty. Otherwise, she would not have gone down to the studio to meet Mr. Redding. And that leaves 3 possibilities. Does it? The first is that Colonel Prothero was dead already. But I don't think that's likely. He'd only been there for 5 minutes. The second possibility is, of course, that he was sitting at the desk writing a note, but it must have been a different note from the one that was found. And the third... Yes? I said. Well, the third is, of course, that the room really was empty. You mean that after he had been shown in, he went out again and came back later? Yes. But why would he have done that? Miss Marple shook her head and stood up. I must go home. It has been good to have this little talk. Thank you, I said. But I feel more confused than before. Oh, don't say that. I have one idea that fits nearly everything. That is, except for one coincidence. And I think one coincidence is all right. More than one, of course, is not. So you really think that you know who killed Colonel Prothero? I asked. Yes, except for... If only that note had said something different. She moved towards the window, and on her way put her hand into the pot of a rather tired houseplant. Poor thing. Your servant should water this plant every day. I suppose it is Mary who looks after it. I'm not sure that looks after are the right words for anything that Mary does, I said. She came back from the inquest and found Lettice Prothero here, and Lettice told her that she didn't clean properly. It upset her. Oh! Miss Marple was just about to step into the garden when she suddenly stopped. So, that was it? Perfectly possible all the time? She turned to me. I have been stupid. Very, very stupid. Good night, Mr. Clement. And she went quickly across the lawn towards her house. Chapter 27. I had just sat down at my desk again when the doorbell rang. I went to answer it and saw there was a letter in the letterbox. I took it out, but as I did so the bell rang again, so I put the letter in my pocket and opened the front door. It was Colonel Melchett. Hello, Clement. I'm on my way home from town. Thought I'd just say hello and see if you could give me a drink. I'll be happy to. Come into the study. Melchett followed me there, and I went and got a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I've got one bit of news for you, Clement. You know that letter that Prothero was writing when he was killed? Yes. We got an expert to look at it, to say whether the 6:20 was written by someone else. And, of course, we sent him examples of Prothero's writing. And do you know the result? That letter was never written by Prothero at all. They still think the 6:20 was written by someone else, but they're not sure. Really? Miss Marple said this evening that the note was all wrong. We looked at each other. Then the telephone rang. I went over and answered it. I want to confess. A high, nervous voice screamed at me. I want to confess. Then the line went dead. I put the phone down and turned to Melchett. You once said that you would go mad if anyone else confessed to the crime. Yes, that was someone who wanted to confess, and we were cut off. Melchett rushed to the telephone. I'll speak to the operator. Do, I said. I'm going out. I think I recognise that voice. Chapter 28. I hurried down the village street. It was 11 o'clock at night, but when I saw a light in a certain upstairs window, I stopped and rang the doorbell. There was the sound of feet, then a key turned in the lock, and a woman opened the door. "Why, it's the vicar," she said. "Good evening, Mrs. Sadler," I replied. "I am sorry it's so late, but I want to see your lodger, Mr. Hawes." I went quickly up the stairs. Hawes was asleep in a chair. An empty pill bottle and a glass of water were on a table beside him. On the floor was a letter. I picked it up. It began, "My dear Clement." I read it all, then picked up the telephone and asked the operator for the vicarage. They told me the line was busy, so I asked them to call me when the line was free. I then took out of my pocket the note that I had found in the vicarage letterbox. The writing was the same as that on the other anonymous letter that I received earlier. I tore it open. I read it once, twice, but I still could not believe what it said. I was beginning to read it a third time when the telephone rang. Like a man in a dream, I picked up the receiver. "Melchett here. Where are you? I found out about that call. The number is... I know the number. Is that where you are speaking from?" "Yes." "So you've got the murderer?" "I don't know," I said. "You'd better come here." I gave him the address. Then I sat down and read the anonymous letter again. Chapter 29. It felt as though years had passed when I heard the door open and Melchett entered the room. He saw Hawes asleep in his chair. "What's happened, Clement?" I passed him one of the letters and he read it aloud. "My dear Vicar, it is a very unpleasant thing that I have to tell you, but I know who is guilty of the crime. It is very painful for me to name a priest of your church. But it is my duty and—" Here the writing ended. Melchett looked at Hawes. "So it's the one man we never even thought about." He went over to the sleeping man and shook him, at first gently, then harder. "He's not asleep. He's drugged." He picked up the pillbox. "Has he?" "I think so," I said. "It's his way out, poor fellow." But Melchett had caught a murderer, and he wanted his murderer punished. He picked up the telephone and asked for Dr. Haydock's number. "Hello, hello, hello. Will the doctor come round at once to see Mr. Hawes? It's urgent." "What? Well, what number is it then?" "Oh, sorry." He rang off. "Wrong number? Hello, you gave me the wrong number." "Yes, give me 39. 9, not 5. And then, hello, is that you, Haydock? Melchett speaking. Come to see Hawes at once, will you? At once, I say." He put the phone down and turned to me. "Where did you find this letter, Clement?" "On the floor, where it had fallen from his hand." "So Miss Marple was right about us finding the wrong note. But why didn't the stupid fellow destroy this one? It just proves he's guilty. Listen, that sounds like a car." He went to the window. "Yes, it's Haydock all right." A moment later, the doctor entered the room. He went across to Hawes and quickly examined him. "I'm not sure that I can save him, Melchett. Do everything possible." "Right. Well, I must drive him to the hospital at Much Benham. Help me to carry him down to the car." We both did so. As Dr. Haydock climbed into the driving seat, he said, "You won't be able to put him in prison. The poor fellow wasn't responsible for his actions, and I shall give evidence for him." "What did he mean by that?" asked Melchett, as we went upstairs again. I explained that Hawes had been ill with sleeping sickness. Always some good reason nowadays for every dirty action, isn't there? But before I could disagree, there was an interruption. The door opened, and Miss Marple walked in. "So sorry, Colonel Melchett, but when I heard that Mr. Hawes was ill, I felt I must come and see if I could do something." "Very kind of you, Miss Marple," Melchett said. "But how did you know Hawes was ill?" "The telephone. You thought you were speaking to Dr. Haydock, but you were speaking to me. My number is 35. "Well, anyway, there is nothing you can do," Melchett said. Because Haydock has taken Hawes to hospital. Oh, that is good news. He will be safe there. She was looking at the pillbox. I suppose he took too many of those? I think you should read this, I said, and gave her Prothero's unfinished letter. She took it and read it. Mr. Clement, why did you come here this evening? I explained about the telephone call and how I had thought I recognized Hawes's voice. Miss Marple nodded. So you got here just in time? Don't you think, I said, that it might be better if Hawes didn't recover? We know the truth now and— Of course, Miss Marple said. Of course, that's what he wants you to think, that you know the truth, and that it's best for everyone as it is. Oh yes, it all fits in, the letter, and the pills, and poor Mr. Hawes' confession. But it's all wrong. That's why I am so glad Mr. Hawes is safe in hospital where no one can reach him. If he gets better, he will tell you the truth. The truth? Yes, that he never killed Colonel Prothero. But the telephone call, I said, the letter, the pills, it's all so clear. That's what he wants you to think. Oh, he's very clever. Keeping the letter and using it this way was very clever indeed. Who do you mean, I said, by he? I mean the murderer, said Miss Marple. I mean Mr. Lawrence Reading. Chapter 30. We looked at her and said nothing. I really think that for a moment we thought she had gone mad. Colonel Melchett was the first to speak. That is nonsense, Miss Marple. Mr. Reading has been proved to be innocent. Of course, said Miss Marple. He made sure of that. No, said Colonel Melchett. He did his best to get himself arrested for the murder. Yes, said Miss Marple. He led us all in that direction, including me. You remember, Mr. Clement, that I was quite shocked when I heard Mr. Reading had confessed to the crime. It upset all my ideas and made me think he was not guilty, when up to then I had been sure that he was. So, it was Lawrence Reading you suspected? I asked. I know that in books it is always the most unlikely person, but in real life it is usually the most obvious one. I have always liked Mrs. Prothero, but I soon realized that she would do anything Lawrence Reading told her. And of course, he is not the sort of young man who would marry a woman who has no money. So, first it was necessary for Colonel Prothero to be removed. Absolute nonsense, Colonel Melchett cried. We know everything that Reading was doing up to 6:50, and Dr. Haydock says Prothero could not have been shot then. No, indeed. Because it was Mrs. Prothero who shot Colonel Prothero, not Mr. Reading. Again we looked at her. I did not think it was right to speak until now, because I still needed one more fact in order to explain what had happened. Then suddenly, just as I was leaving Mr. Clement's study, I noticed the plant in the pot by the window, and, well, there it was, clear as day. Mad, quite mad, Melchett whispered to me. But Miss Marple just smiled and continued. I liked Anne and Lawrence, so when they both confessed in that silly way, well, I was happy that I had been wrong. And I began to think of other people who might want Colonel Prothero dead. The 7 suspects, I murmured. Yes, indeed. There was Archer. And there was your Mary. She's been Archer's girlfriend for a long time, and she was alone in the house when it happened. And then, of course, there was Lettice, wanting freedom and money to do as she liked, and Dennis, who would do anything for Lettice. No! I cried. And then, of course, there is poor Mr. Hawes. And you. Me! I said. Well, yes, there was that church money that disappeared. Either you or Mr. Hawes must have taken it. Of course, I was always sure it was Mr. Hawes, but then there was also dear Griselda. But Mrs. Clement was not even here, interrupted Melchett. She returned from London on the 6:50 train. That's what she told you, said Miss Marple. But that train was half an hour late, and at 7:15 I saw her walking to Old Hall, so she must have come back on an earlier train. She looked at me. In fact, she was seen. But perhaps you know that. I gave her the second anonymous letter I had received. It said that Griselda had been seen leaving Lawrence Redding's cottage at 6:20 on the day of the murder. It had made me think about the past romance between Lawrence and Griselda. Perhaps Prothero had found out about it and was going to tell me. So Griselda stole the pistol and shot him before I got home. Miss Marple handed me back the note. But by Thursday afternoon the crime had been very carefully planned. Lawrence Redding first called on the vicar, knowing that he was out. He had with him the pistol, which he hid in that plant pot. When the vicar came in, Lawrence explained that he had called to tell him that he had decided to leave the village. At 5:30 he telephoned the vicar from the North Lodge, pretending he was the wife of a dying man. Mrs. Prothero and her husband had just gone into the village, and, very strangely, she did not take her handbag. Just before 6:20, she walked past my garden and stopped to speak to me. This was so that I would notice that she had no gun with her. Then she went round the corner of the house to the study window. The poor colonel was sitting at the desk writing his letter to you. She took the pistol from the pot, came up behind him, and shot him. Then she dropped the pistol on the floor and walked down to the studio. "But the shot," said Melchett. "You didn't hear the shot?" "There is, I think, something called a Maxim silencer." So perhaps the sneeze that Mrs. Price Ridley's servant heard might have been the shot. But anyway, Mrs. Prothero and Mr. Redding went into the studio together, and then realized, of course, that I would not leave my garden until I saw them come out again. I smiled at Miss Marple's humorous understanding of her own character. But when they did come out, their behaviour was happy and normal. And that was a bad mistake, because if they had really said goodbye to each other, they would have been sad. But because of the murder, they did not dare to appear upset. For the next 10 minutes, they were careful to be seen by people in the village. Then at last, Mr. Redding went back to the vicarage. He picked up the pistol and the silencer, and left the forged letter with the time written on it in blue ink. But when he left the letter, he found the one written by Colonel Prothero, and he thought that it might be useful, so he put it in his pocket. Then he altered the time of the clock to the same as on the forged letter. He did not know that it was always kept a quarter of an hour ahead. He did this to make it seem that someone was trying to make Mrs. Prothero look guilty. Then he left the vicarage, and met you outside, Vicar. And he acted as though he was very upset, which was clever, because someone who had just committed a murder would, of course, try to behave normally. Then he got rid of the silencer, and marched into the police station with the pistol, and confessed to the crime. "What about the shot heard in the woods?" I asked. "Was that the coincidence you mentioned?" "Oh, no." Miss Marple shook her head. It was absolutely necessary for a shot to be heard, because, without it, Mrs. Prothero might have continued to be a suspect. I believe that picric acid explodes if you drop something heavy onto it. And remember, Vicar, that you met Mr. Redding carrying a large stone in that same place in the woods where you found the picric acid later. But the shot was heard at 6:30 when Lawrence and Anne had come out of the studio. You saw them. Mr. Redding had probably used some rope to hang the stone above the picric acid. Then he set fire to the end of the rope, knowing that it would take about 20 minutes to burn through, and for the stone to fall and cause the explosion. When you met him, he had just picked up the stone to take it away, so that no one could discover what had happened. Yes, but when you appeared, he pretended that he was bringing it to me for my Japanese garden. Only, Miss Marple paused, it was the wrong sort of stone for my garden, and that made me think. "But what about Hawes?" Melchett said. "He has confessed to the crime." "Yes, but a different one. Poor Mr. Hawes felt more and more guilty about taking the money from the collection." "What?" "As I said, Mr. Redding kept Colonel Prothero's letter, and he realized that the Colonel was saying that Mr. Hawes was the thief. So he came back here with Mr. Hawes last night, and, I think, managed to put some much stronger pills in Mr. Hawes's box. Then, when Mr. Hawes was unconscious, he put this letter into his pocket. When the poor young man was found dead and the letter was read, everyone would think that he had shot Colonel Prothero and killed himself because he felt so guilty. In fact, I think that Mr. Hawes must have found that letter tonight, and, in his confused state, he decided to confess. But what about the other telephone call? Colonel Melchett asked. The one from Mr. Redding's cottage to Mrs. Price Ridley. Ah, said Miss Marple, that is the coincidence. Dear Griselda made that call. She and Dennis had heard that Mrs. Price Ridley had been gossiping about the vicar and the church money, and they thought that this would make her stop. The coincidence was that the call was made at exactly the same time as the pretend shot from the wood, so it seemed that the two must be connected. Your explanation is a very good one, Miss Marple, Melchett said. But I don't believe you can prove any of it. I know, said Miss Marple, but you do believe it is true, don't you? Yes, I do, but we need the proof. Miss Marple coughed. That is why I thought perhaps... Yes? We might be allowed to set a little trap. Chapter 31. I looked at her, shocked. A trap? What kind of a trap? What if someone telephoned Mr. Redding and warned him? Miss Marple said. Suppose Dr. Haydock mentioned that Mrs. Sadler had seen him changing the pills in Mr. Hawes's box. Well, if Mr. Redding is innocent, that would mean nothing to him. But, if he isn't, he might do something stupid, I said. And prove he's guilty, said Melchett. Yes, but would Haydock be willing to do that? Miss Marple interrupted him excitedly. Oh, it was just a thought. But here is Dr. Haydock, so we can ask him. Haydock came into the room, looking very tired. I think Hawes is going to live, although perhaps I wish that he wasn't. You may think differently, said Melchett, when you have heard what we now know. And he quickly told him about Miss Marple's explanation of the crime. And then he told him of her idea. Haydock's gentle opinions about criminals changed immediately. If this is true, he said, I'll do anything you want. That poor fellow Hawes, he nearly died. And if he hadn't, he would have been found guilty of murder. Lawrence Redding deserves the heaviest punishment possible. So he began to arrange the trap with Melchett, and I walked Miss Marple home. Chapter 32. There is not much more to tell. Miss Marple's plan succeeded. Lawrence Redding was not an innocent man, and so the news that Mrs. Sadler had seen him change Mr. Hawes's pills did indeed make him do something stupid. His first thought, I imagine, must have been to run away, but he could not leave without telling Anne. So he went up to Old Hall that night, and 2 of Colonel Melchett's policemen followed him. He threw small stones at Anne's window to wake her up, and she came down to the garden to talk to him. So the 2 policemen heard the whole conversation, and it proved that Miss Marple had been right in every detail. Lawrence Redding and Anne Prothero were accused of the murder and found guilty in court. Inspector Slack was praised for his energy and ability. Nothing at all was said about Miss Marple's part in solving the crime, and that was how she wanted it. Lettice came to see me just after they were arrested. She wandered into my study and told me that she had always been sure her stepmother was involved. Saying that she had lost her yellow hat had been an excuse to search my study. She hoped that she would find something the police had not, but when she had found nothing, she had dropped Anne's earring by the desk. I knew she had done it, so what did it matter if that proved she had killed him? There are some things that Lettice will never understand. What are you going to do now? I asked her. When it's all over, I am going abroad, with my mother. I looked up, surprised. Didn't you guess? Mrs. Lestrange is my mother. She is dying, and she wanted to see me, so she came down here using a different name. Dr. Haydock helped her. He was in love with her once. I think he still is. Anyway, she went to see Father and told him she was dying and wanted to see me so much. Father was an awful man. He said I thought she was dead. But Mother sent a note to me, and I arranged to leave the tennis party early and meet her near the vicarage at 6:15. We left each other before 6:30, but afterwards I was frightened that the police might think she had killed Father. That was why I cut up that old picture of her. I was afraid the police might recognize it. Dr. Haydock was frightened too. Sometimes, I believe, he really thought she had done it. She paused. It's strange. She and I belong to each other. Father and I didn't. But Mother, well, I shall be with her till the end. She got up, and I held her hand. Some day, I hope, you will be happy. You deserve it, Lettice. Do I really? She said, with a little laugh. I'm not sure about that. Goodbye, Mr. Clement. You've been very kind to me always. You and Griselda. Griselda. I needed to tell her how badly the anonymous letter had upset me. At first she laughed, and then she told me that I should have trusted her. However, she added, I'm going to be very serious and well-behaved from now on. I found it hard to imagine Griselda like that. She continued, You see, Len, I have something new coming into my life. It's coming into your life too, and you can't call me a dear child any more when we have a real child of our own. I have also decided that since now I'm going to be a real wife and mother, I must look after the house as well. So I have bought 2 books, one on house management and one on mother love. You haven't bought a book on how to treat a husband, have you? I asked, as I put my arms round her. I don't need to, said Griselda. I love you dearly. What more do you want? Nothing, I said. Could you say, just once, that you love me madly? Griselda, I said. Not only that, but I worship you. My wife was just about to kiss me when suddenly she pulled away. Miss Marple's coming. Don't say a word to her about the baby. I don't want everyone telling me to lie down all the time. Tell her I've gone to play tennis. That will stop her thinking anything about babies. Miss Marple came to the window, smiled, and asked for Griselda. Griselda, I said, has gone to play tennis. Oh, but surely... There was a worried expression in Miss Marple's eyes. That is not wise just now. And then her face went pink. So we quickly started to talk about the Prothero case, and of Dr. Stone, who had turned out to be a well-known thief. Miss Cram, though, had been cleared of any crime. She had at last told the police that she had taken the suitcase to the woods, but had thought she was protecting Dr. Stone's archaeological discoveries from his enemies. Then Miss Marple said, I hope dear Griselda is not doing too much. I was in the bookshop in Much Benham yesterday. Poor Griselda. That book on mother love had given Miss Marple the clue. I wonder, I said, if you were to commit a murder whether you would ever be found out. What an awful idea, said Miss Marple. And how naughty of you, Mr. Clement. She got up. But of course you are feeling very cheerful. She paused by the window. My love to dear Griselda, and tell her that any little secret is safe with me. Really, Miss Marple is rather sweet.